last night was a football game, which played out as predicted by me. Ravens won. They're just a little bit better than a team that feels like they're a mess in the Buccaneers, and now they lose Shaq Barrett for the year with a torn Achilles. Yikes. Here's Todd Bowles, head coach of the Buccaneers, talk about getting out of the dark.
Until you win ball games consistently and play 4 quarters consistently, it's going to be dark. That doesn't mean we can't get out of it. I mean, we just have a lot of work to do as coaches and as players.
Here's Todd Bowles had this exchange with a reporter about being 3-5.
When you find yourself at 3-5, what's the most surprising thing about that 8 games in?
Nothing surprising when you are what your record says you are. You try to work your way out of it and put your head down, and you can be pissed off and do everything you want, but until you do something about it, you have to own it. So we own that and we understand that.
Here's Tom Brady summing up the loss.
I think we've struggled pretty much at everything. We just struggle in the red area, struggle in third down, struggle in the run game, 2-point plays, short yardage, backed up, start first quarter, start of the third quarter, not very good offensive football.
Here's Lamar Jackson on how good he thinks his team can be.
I feel like we're very close. We right there, but still room for improvement. Little mistakes we still making out there. We changed those, and I feel like the sky's the limit for us. Though.
But by the way, a couple mistakes here or there, sky's the limit, feels kind of similar to what Aaron Rodgers said. Only Aaron Rodgers says it, and he's calling everybody out. Right? That's a big. Let's get to a couple interesting points before we get to the absolute topic of the day. I'm not bearing the lead in Tom Brady's personal life, but I do think there's a game to discuss. Okay, the Ravens are okay. They got a lot of injuries. Lamar wasn't particularly good in the first half. He figured it out in the second half. He completed all 8 of his throws. He made some smart runs. They win the game. They got the Saints and the Panthers and the Jaguars and the Broncos in their next 4 games. They'll be favored in all of those games. They should win all of those games before they go to the Steelers, to the Browns with Deshaun, Falcons, Steelers, Bengals. They have a schedule that opens up for them. But let's also be honest, though they lost to the Bills in a close game, and the Dolphins game they should have won, they lost to the Giants as well. So we don't know what their top end is, but they're going to make the playoffs, and they're going to be in good position. Can we cease and desist with any of this? The Ravens need to pay Lamar Jackson. Why won't the Ravens? Oh, now they're going to pay Lamar Jackson. I understand fans who say this because you're a fan. You don't really know. You haven't necessarily paid attention. Right? But let's just kind of be honest. The Ravens offered Lamar Jackson a gigantic sum of money, reportedly $200 million of which are guaranteed. He wants $251 because Deshaun Watson is guaranteed $250 million over 5 years. And the things that are limiting him are, 1, their ability to fill the team around him. 2, I think most importantly, he doesn't have an agent. And those level of complex deals where you're putting money here and putting money there and different sorts of bonuses that are attainable. So it is but isn't kind of guaranteed. Those sorts of things you can only do when you have a vast amount of experience of putting these contracts together. It takes a long time and a lot of thorough discussion. And one of the things that the Ravens said repeatedly in the offseason, like, we haven't really talked to them, And I believe it to be true. Because never have the Ravens said we don't want Lamar. And based upon all reporting, they've offered him a gigantic contract. It's just not to the level that he thinks he should get. And, oh, yeah, by the way, every player except for one, and then every team except for one, likely agree with him. Deshaun Watson's contract is what he wants more. And I have told you, no, I don't believe Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I don't. That said, he has every right to believe he should make more money than Deshaun Watson. He's been an MVP. Deshaun hasn't. He hasn't been hurt. Deshaun has. He has no off-the-field issues. Deshaun has all those lawsuits. He's not wrong. The problem is that he doesn't have an agent or enough people around him. They're like, look, I get it, the way you think it'll work. Okay, and in some ways has worked. You get $1 more than the previous guy, but this is an outlier contract. The Ravens aren't going to or don't want to give it to you. And the only thing you're doing is not betting on yourself. You run the risk of hurting yourself because they can franchise tag you for 2 years. And if you get hurt, God forbid, you're not going to get that $250 million ever, potentially, if it's a terrible football injury, which could happen. But please don't say the Ravens haven't offered him a ton of money or don't want him or haven't offered him money. Like, that's just stupid talk. All right, let's get to the story of the day. Tom Brady and Gisele are getting a divorce. I don't remember. I've been doing this since, God, how long have I doing this? 2003? Yeah, 2003. So nearly, 20 years I've been doing this. 20 years. I don't remember talking about somebody's personal life. But part of it is the door was opened when he shared his personal life in Facebook. Part of it is this has been a very public story. I would offer you that I don't believe for 1 second football is the main cause of him being divorced. I feel like it's a symptom of something broken in the relationship, right? And you're like, wow, you sound like a therapist. Yeah, when you go through, an end of a relationship and a long one in a marriage, you go to therapy and you try and kind of figure things out. And he looks thin, he looks tired. Also, like, if we're honest, Tom Brady looks like he's had some work done too. Does that turn her off? Is that something that he thinks she pushed him into? Right? There's a whole lot of different layers to it we don't know. I think she's the Yoko Ono in the end of the New England Patriots. I mean, go back and track it, okay? You remember when he had a falling out, it was over supposedly Alex Guerrero, okay, who was first welcomed into the facility, and then they're like, let's not do that anymore. And then it was how he was treated and respected by the organization, and those comments were public from Gisele Bündchen. The reason the Patriots worked was they had the only superstar quarterback who was like, I don't need to take the most money. And you know what? If you guys want to bust my chops in film, go for it. I can take it. And the person who was bothered the most by it was Gisele. Right? She was the one who, when Wes Welker dropped the ball, which was not a great pass, hard catch, but could have caught it, against the Giants. She's going in the elevator. My husband cannot catch out the passes at the right? That was her. And I don't necessarily blame her. Like, we're all a product of not just our upbringing, but how we live. It's really hard for somebody, for example, in California to understand, and I was in New York for 2 days, like, you're going through fall. It's how you dress, how you act, the time you're outside, the time you're inside, how much you watch sports. All that is different based upon your environment. She is the most successful supermodel in the history of the industry. Supermodels are not treated like normal human beings. They don't give them $20 a day per diem and go like, hey, go fend for yourself, right? They're treated like royalty. And by her estimation, her husband should be treated the same. And she voiced her displeasure with it. How do you think that went over with Bill? So if it's me, I think it's a sad story because, and I understand that the presentation in public is not always what happens in private, but the presentation in public seemed like loving father, seemed like super into her, right? That they doubled down their relationship a couple years ago when they had some hard times. Seemed like he was into her and her stuff, and she was into him and his stuff. It can't be about football. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand if you tell your family, like, hey, look, we're going to do Tampa, and then we're done. And I don't think it's just football. Remember, he signed a deal to work for Fox whenever football is done. So it's one thing to go, hey, I'm not going to play football again. And everybody goes, yay, Dad's home. And then he goes, you know what? I don't like you guys that much. I want to go back and play football. And then when he does get home, he's like, oh, yeah, hey, by the way, when I am done playing football, I'll be here Monday through Thursday, but then Friday I got to leave and go and work for Fox because I love football and I love making money and I'm going to go do that. So I think there's an element there. But there's also the element to the who in their right mind tells their husband, who's been the most successful person ever in his field, when to stop going to work. You know? I'll give you an example. It's different. It might be hard to follow. It's Doug Gottlieb Show here on Fox Sports Radio. My grandpa was like a self-made dude. Right? He became an accountant, but he put himself through college by overnight. He would early in the morning. He'd go down to the docks. They bought a truck. Him and a buddy bought a truck. They buy fish from the fishermen and come in, and then they go and they'd sell it to restaurants in New York. And that's what he would do from 4 in the morning until whatever. And then he'd catch a nap, and then he'd go take night classes, and then go do it again. So he was an accountant. And then while being an accountant, he became a car dealer. How to become a car dealer? If you know anything about accountants, they look at your books and they're like, well, this, and a guy couldn't pay, so he's like, I'll take a piece of the business. And eventually, he took over the business. He retired at 60 years old. And keep in mind, my grandpa he was like one of these cats that he could really dress. Like back in the 70s and 80s. And again, I know those styles don't translate, but he would go to work every day, beautiful suit, kerchief, he looked the part. And then at 60 years old, he was like, I'm done. Then you go over to his house, instead of being perfectly haircut, always dressed nice, no matter what he did, you go over to his house, it'd be 2 p.m, he's in his boxers watching Wapner. Swear to God. A lot of dudes, when they stop working, they stop being a person. You start just kind of hanging around that. That's not who. And I'm sure Tom Brady's that's not who I am. I'm gonna get up. I mean, I've been getting in and watching film at 5:00 for the last 20 years. I'm not gonna just shut it down and do nothing. That's not who I am. And if somebody says, "Hey, I'm gonna take away," or for our relationship, you have to take away the blueprint, the fundamentals of who you are as a person, I'm sure he didn't like that. But I don't know. Jay Stu, Byer, you guys with me? Do you think this relationship ended because of football?
Well, I also think that she probably had her career that she probably put to the side for the family. And I think that at some point maybe she was expecting Tom to do the same.
Is that reason to get a divorce? No, I mean, it's a real.
I wouldn't have brought it up if I.
No, I mean,
think.
Again, this is. I mean, hire a nanny. We'll work through it. I don't know. What do you think, Jay Stu?
I definitely do not think it's the reason they got divorced. It was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. It was probably the last contributing factor, maybe. But we all in this room are grown men who've had failed relationships.
Not Ramos.
No, he has too.
Or Dan, actually.
No, you guys were ripping through women in high school, and the relationships came to an end.
Ramos, man, there's legendary stories. There's just parts of Pasadena he can't go in. Right? Ramos was slaying.
But anyone who's been through a failed relationship knows that there's so many things that go into it, so many things that are irreconcilable before you get to those tangible things. I think this is the most reported and the most public, but for those to say they got into a divorce because Tom chose football over his family, that just sounds short-sighted to me.
Football guys damn right she did. Damn right he did. But all right, Tommy.
But it's the blanket of doing it. It sounds very simple, but it's everything that comes with it. To just say was it because of football? No. But was football the reason why they were maybe having troubles? Why there was no date night? Why there was no alone time or family vacations and all of that could be because of football. So it sounds very simplistic to be no, it wasn't because of football. But if football was the thing that was constantly getting in the way, I think that's a pretty good way to characterize it.
I think it's a really good discussion. And there's parts of me that relates to it and understands it. And there's parts of me that just goes, hey, I also relate and understand that there's things a ton of things we don't know. Right? We don't know. I agree with you, Dan. You're making great points there, right? There's a lot more to football. The counter to that would be, it wasn't like when she met him, he was like an accountant. And he's like, hey, I'm going to try this football thing. And then the football thing kind of spiraled, and she was like, hey, you got to kind of dial it back because I gave up my career for you.
And that's what I would come back with and say, it wasn't like she was a nobody either,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, but again, they got in this relationship, they got married, and I mean, part of it is when you get married a lot of times, and especially you get married young, and he wasn't super young, right? He was, he was 13 years, and he's 45 now, so he was, 32? But you get married, and there's things you're like, that one didn't come up, you know? I don't know. I don't know what agreement they had, and if he violated that agreement, I don't know how much it's time. I would tell you that, and I have a friend who I remember he got divorced, and his ex-wife was just like, look, he was never really present. You know, he was home, but he wasn't home. I would guess that's a part of it, and that's a little bit more of what Dan's talking about, right? Where it's like it's not football per se, but when Tom Brady does football, he does football. That's all he does is football. All his text, all his calls, all the videos on his phone are about football. I don't know. We'll have some more, but man, that's a tough 24 hours for Thomas Edward Patrick Brady the second. Lose a football game, standalone, and then you announce that you're divorced. Which, by the way, it got divorced. They're divorced. He wrote it like they're divorced, not separated, not she filed for divorce. That they're divorced. It's Florida, so maybe things happen much quicker there.